Yeah. 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 Welcome to another episode of Poker Truck. Should I call it Poker Truck instead of Low Stakes Crusher? I don't know. So, what's going on in the world of the low stakes crushing? So, I keep making excuses for these videos being in my truck. So here's where I'm at. I've paid a video editor a not insignificant amount of money to help me with the hand history thing, the way the vloggers do so well. Apparently I just have a blind spot in my brain. I've tried and tried and tried. Can't figure out how to make it look good. Excuse me. I paid someone to help me, and the result has been, let's say, less than satisfactory, which is another way of saying no results whatsoever. So I haven't made any progress with that. I need to figure out what to do there, but I'm still going to do updates and also, my little daily nuggets of what to do, in certain spots or what have you. So what's going on right now? It is the end of May. I know it's been a long time in between videos. I'm sorry for that. I'm going to do my best. What I'm doing really is I'm kind of giving up on the hand history thing for the moment, and I'm just going to forge ahead with the regular videos and hope that folks enjoy it. And it'll just help me get better at doing it, even if no one's watching it. If you're watching it, thank you. So yeah, it's the end of May. I have my annual trip to Vegas for the World Series planned starting June 19th. So I'm in a bit of a kind of an effort to build up my bankroll, as I always am at this time of the year, to have a little bit of extra cheese to go to Vegas with. And that's mostly okay. I had a pretty big setback last week, but I'm still on the upward trend. That's all good. Games are good. No problems there. So I'm going to keep kind of updating on the state of things, building up to the trip to Vegas. And then when I get to Vegas, my plan is I'm going to upload a bunch of small videos. I did this last year, actually, on a different channel. Sort of just like what's going on, how things are going, different stuff around Vegas, what's happening in my playing. I'm going to play the seniors event. That'll be interesting. Yeah. So anyway, stay tuned for all that if you would be so kind. So straddling. That's today's topic. I had a couple people talk. We had discussions while we were playing a couple times about straddling. And then I had a friend of mine ask me a question about the right way to straddle or whatever. So let's talk about straddling. If you don't know what that is, if you're new, when you're playing No Limit Hold'em and other games too, but we're talking about Hold'em, you have the blinds, right? So you have the small blind and the big blind that come immediately to the left of the button. And those are forced bets that begin the action, get some money in the pot. And a straddle is a voluntary, you can actually structure a game to have a mandatory straddle, but generally speaking, it's a voluntary third blind, essentially. And depending on where you play, you may be able to straddle anywhere except for the blinds, or anywhere you want, or only under the gun, or only on the button. There's all different ways that it happens. But if you don't understand what straddling is, the easiest way to explain it is when you straddle under the gun. So let's say you're playing 1-2. Typically the rule is that you double the blind or more. And again, some rooms will have a rule that this is how much you can straddle, and that's it, like $5, and that's all you can do. Other rooms will be up to a certain amount. Other rooms will be any amount you want, whatever. So let's say that you can straddle $5 in this room. If you're playing 1-2 and you're going to straddle under the gun, that would mean you have the 1 and the 2, small blind, big blind, and then what was under the gun now puts $5 out before the cards are dealt. So essentially you have 3 blinds, right? 1, 2, 5. And the way the action would go is it just starts immediately to the left of that straddle, and that's called a live straddle, meaning when it gets back to that person gets to close the action and decide whether to raise or call or fold or whatever. And that's the simplest way to explain it. Okay, so let's talk about straddling. I should be able to wrap this entire video up by staring into the camera and saying, okay, here you go. Everything you know about straddling. Don't straddle. But people like to straddle. So we're going to make the whole video based on the assumption that you are going to straddle, and then you want to understand a little bit about how it works and where you can do it and whatnot. But yeah, in general, putting money in voluntarily in the dark when you don't know what your hand is yet is just setting it on fire. It's not a good idea to straddle, but there can be reasons to do it. The biggest reason to do it is everyone else is doing it, and you don't want to dampen the mood and make the game worse by being a stick in the mud and saying, I refuse to straddle. That's the biggest reason to do it. But okay, so let's look at how it works. Well, I mentioned the whole thing where different plays you can straddle. There is a kind of straddling we're not really going to talk about, but I'm going to explain it here real quick. It's becoming increasingly popular, and as far as protecting the structure of the game, and we're going to get to that in a minute, why that matters, this is probably the fairest way to straddle. What happens is you can, in this particular style of straddling, you can straddle on the button. However, when the action starts, it doesn't start immediately to the left of the button, which would be the small blind, right? It skips the blinds and goes to under the gun like normal, goes around, and if it hasn't been raised, and try to follow me here, if it hasn't been raised, it skips the button, goes to the small blind, then the big blind, then back to the button to close the action. If it has been raised before it gets around to the button, then it just goes right through the button the way you would normally expect. That means the button would act, then the small blind, then the big blind. So here's the part about protecting the structure of the game and why this is becoming more popular. When, obviously the small blind and the big blind are forced to put money in the pot in the dark, which we already covered is bad, but they're forced to do it. That's how the game works. The mitigating factor for that is that they get to close the action. So they get to base their decision on how to proceed based on what all the other people in the hand have done, then they get to decide. So that sort of mitigates the fact that they've put money in the dark and they're going to be out of position for the whole hand if they continue, right? That's why the game is structured that way. It's like that on purpose, right? So that they can close the action. Well, if the place you play allows button straddling and the button, let's say one particular person always straddles his button every time, well, that person is disrupting the structure of the game because now the blinds have put in their money in the dark because they're required to, and they're now forced to act before anyone else has acted, and they're still going to be out of position if they choose to continue. So that is hugely more disadvantageous to the blinds than before, right? And I'm going to explain why this is a bad idea to do anyway, but that disrupts the structure of the game. It really kind of makes it less fair for those people. And if one person does it every time, now personally, I'm happy to have additional money in the dark in every pot. I don't care. But game structure wise, it's not the best for button straddling to be allowed, frankly. However, people do it because when you straddle on the button, and it's a traditional straddle where it goes, straddle, and then it just starts with the blind and goes around. Now the button gets to close the action pre-flop and be in position for the whole rest of the hand too. So all of those together are a pretty big advantage, right? That's why that blind hopping thing is becoming more popular. My opinion is that in low stakes games, I don't like that structure where it hops the blinds. And the reason is simply, I've seen it many times where relatively new, / recreational players are confused by it. Not initially, they're confused literally by what to do and when. But even once they figure out what the action is, they still are confused and not comfortable with sort of the implications of what they should, how does this affect what they should do, what the best thing to do is. And anytime you're making a new player or a recreational player less comfortable, that's bad for the game. That's why I don't like it. Not because of anything to do with the game structure or fairness of the blind money or anything like that. Just for that simple reason, introducing discomfort to folks who might not be super experienced. I think that's a bad idea. Okay. So we're going to put that kind of straddling to bed. That's all I have to say about that. We're going to talk about the two most common kinds of straddling and why you would or would not do it. Under the gun and the button. Okay, so if your goal is to gain the position pre-flop and post-flop, then the button is the best place to straddle because that's what accomplishes that, right? I personally feel that straddling on the button is bad for the game, and I'm going to tell you why. But so when you straddle the button, like I said, typically the action starts with the blinds, goes around, ends with you, and then for the whole rest of the hand, you're in position. That is an advantage. The reason I started the video saying don't straddle is that while it is of an advantage to do that compared to straddling elsewhere, you're still putting money in the dark. You don't know what your hand is, and you're putting money in the pot. That's terrible for value, right? But again, we're assuming you're going to straddle. So if you're going to straddle, that would be a reason to straddle the button, is to gain position both pre-flop and post-flop. Now, why do I say I don't like that? The problem with that scenario is that any action you take, right, that forces players to play better or tighter is bad for you, right? So when you straddle the button, you are putting the blinds under duress, like I mentioned before. They are now forced to act before anybody else acts. They have no idea what anyone's going to do, and it makes them play tighter and fold a lot more versus when they get to see what everyone else does and it gets them like, oh, it's only a couple more bucks. Oh, it's only $5 more and throw the money in. They're much more likely to do that, to play looser, to play wider opening ranges, etc. All of those things are good for you. Incentivizing the blinds to play better by folding a wider range is bad for you, right? That's why I do not recommend straddling on the button. So, whoa, that's a big bump. Oh, it's an earthquake. Not really. So yeah, that's that. Sorry for the shakes of the camera there. Straddling under the gun is disadvantageous, of course, for the obvious reason. Again, money in the dark, but also clearly you voluntarily put money in there, and the action starts to your left, and you are in early position doing that, right? You're not robbing position from the blinds to where you are last to act both pre and post flop in that way. You're going to end up with money in the pot either way and spend the rest of the hand usually out of position, right? If it just so happens it ends up being only you and a blind, then congratulations, you get to be in position. But generally speaking, you're setting yourself up to be involved in a pot with money in the dark in there, and you're going to be out of position the vast majority of the time. That's bad strategically. However, if your goal is to appear gambly or spice up the action, sort of, or maybe everyone's talking about, let's all do a straddle instead of playing 1-2, let's do 1-2 with a $5 straddle. Try to get everybody to do it under the gun for this reason, right? You don't want to force the blinds to play better. You just want the game to be more gambly. And if everyone is doing it, then in theory, it's not a disadvantageous for you to do it because everyone is doing it. So it'll balance out. And since you're a low stakes crusher, right, you're going to play better than they are, right? So no disadvantage there if everyone is doing it. But those are the reasons. If you're going to, like I said, I'm telling you not to straddle. But if you're going to straddle, and I do it sometimes, even when I'm not compelled to by other people. I admit it, I do once in a while. But I'm just saying, generally speaking, straddling, go ahead, VW Microbus, I think it's cool. Generally speaking, don't straddle. Putting money in the dark is not a good idea. But if you're going to do it under the gun. And this is the reason, for those reasons that I mentioned. I hope you learned something from that. Like, give us some thought. Let me know in the comments what you think about that. Maybe you think I'm completely wrong. Maybe you think straddling is the best thing ever and the button is the only place to do it. Let's hear what you have to say. If you want this content to keep going, people to find it, the channel to grow, and believe me, I think I have like 12 subscribers or something, which is like not statistically different from zero. Please like the video and subscribe. The more people that do that, the better the videos do in searches on YouTube, and the more people see them and the more people can subscribe. And before you know it, I've eclipsed Brad Owen in a massive show of YouTube dominance. Okay, that's not likely, but you get the idea. Like and subscribe. Play better today. Later. Bye.